outcompetes the others, and there's no reason to fear that. It just happens. It is the fundamental of natural selection. I'm sure you've heard of this. We talked about it yesterday as well. But sometimes the losers lose and the winners win, and at least when we're talking about long-term trends in ecology, that's perfectly okie-dokie. But here's the thing we've been talking around, the part we haven't actually talked about more clearly. It is notable. Remember that conditions change. In an ecosystem, one year, species number 1 might do really well, but next year, if it's a little more arid, species number 2 would do really well. And next year, if it's especially wet, species number 3 might do best, and the year after that, species number 4 might really shine. Every loser has his day or something. So if you have a number of competing species, and one of them outcompetes all the others, that's a good year for that one. But that might not be ideal in the long term. The ecosystem as a whole benefits from the diversity, because for the long-term maintenance of the ecosystem, it's like a Swiss Army knife. You've got to have a bunch of different blades for a bunch of different jobs. You've got to have a bunch of different grasses for a bunch of different seasons. If the competitor can thin out the winners, the losers stay in the game so that they'll still have some seeds in the ground for next year. This is the key issue in the predator effect, that they regulate biodiversity by preventing competitive exclusion, which is good because over time, different competitors are more or less critical depending on the conditions. Quiet. Anybody else want to talk about this? Thank you, by the way, to all of you who contributed to that response. I'm not kidding. Nothing else about that one? Okay, so here's my checklist of announcements. How many of you are in Mr. Forster's class? Oh, hot dang. Is that in everybody?
No.
Wait, who's not in Mr. Forster's English class? Ha ha!
Land and Tech are seniors.
They're seniors, okay. You're not in mad. Ha ha, everybody we throw rocks, he's not mad.
I'm not mad.
She's not in mad, that's why they sit in the corners in the back. Is that a coincidence? You added late, right?
Yeah.
And you added late? Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. What? Lane's here? Okay. Mr. Forster is offering you a reading this week by Jared Diamond, which I don't know, how many of you have actually read it already? Okay, I won't tell them, don't worry. Your secret is safe with me, kids. Your secret is safe with me. Yeah, copy off him.
I'm quoting you on that, Jose.
So, I guess you'll just have to ask Mr. Forster. All I know is he's asked his students to read the article that was the foundation for collapse. So that slideshow that we saw at the beginning of the year about how there's this pattern among civilizations where they mismanage their environmental resources, power is mishandled, and then your neighbors get the competitive advantage over you. Mr. Forster and I share a lot of our fusion of academic and social responsibilities. And so he and I talk about what we're teaching sometimes, because believe it or not, some of us actually care about this stuff. And Homeboy and I agreed that it would be cool if we were on the same page. And he's like, hey, check it out, I'm on the same page, I'm doing this. I was like, oh, you're on the same page 3.5 months ago. And so I just wanted to offer my services if I can help you with his work in his class. And I want to remind you that the slideshow we saw in my class about Easter Island and the Aztecs and the Vikings and the Anasazi is in parallel to the article that you're reading. Am I? What should I mention? Any obvious differences or obvious? Who's read the article?
Well, one of the questions was on like the big 5 reasons for a flag and stuff.
Oh, so the big 5 are mismanage of the environment? Is that one of them?
Yeah.
Enemies? Neighbors?
Yeah, like good neighbors leaving and then like bad neighbors coming in.
Right. Political inaction?
Yeah.
That was one of our steps. We talked about that. Whatever. Just throwing it out there that Mr. Forrester and I are kind of rubbing elbows on this assignment with a slight time delay. Are there any questions about the pre-labs that are due this Wednesday and this Thursday? Yes?
On the data tables, it's 25 like slots for each one. Is it like 25 plus?
Yeah, I think so. And I can, hold on. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, I got 24.
Okay. And that's for both the tables, right? You want 25 on both tables?
Hold on a second. I got to find my spray bottle because these girls are making too much noise. All right. What was that?
You even said that. Oh.
What? Who was talking? Yeah.
So 25 for each table.
Yes, 25 for the.
Getting in my ear, like just.
This one, 25.
What about the other one, the SBI?
I think those are fixed. You can just do the same as the sample. Same as the sample in the handout. Yes?
Do we have groups for this?
You will pick your groups at the day of the lab, no big deal.
Oh, but this is pre-lab?
For the pre-lab, everyone does their individual work, as with all pre-labs all year.
Got it.
Sorry, can I answer any questions? Because this isn't working for me. Yes?
So we do both the pre-labs, right? Not just the one we went over yesterday.
Tagging is Wednesday.
Okay.
1 pre-lab. You need the math and the procedures. And then the SDI, Species Diversity, Shannon Diversity Index. That's this thing, where you got to bring the sample tables and do the homework, where you practice the math. I swear I can answer questions. I'd love to help. Yeah, that's right. Sorry, I don't aim very well. Sorry, you're what do you call that? Collateral damage? Sorry, Jackie. You were doing a great job of focusing very well. Yeah, bycatch. Sabina being my target here. Can I help? Thank you for helping her. Can I help? Okay. Well then. Now here's what I'd like to do. There's a couple of study goals that I want to highlight in each of your assignments. But in this unit, because it was only 2 chapters and we have a little over 2 weeks, I kind of feel like in this particular topic with the endangered species assignment, I don't really have a lot of study goals that I need to speak about. There's just a few here and there that I want to hit on. We could go over 3 assignments today, I suppose, unless you have other questions, and I'm also happy to help you. Let's start with 5.2, please. And remember that everything is numbered funny. What's that? She came and went, and no, the only thing was to put up the videos that the kids couldn't put up yesterday. Oh, dude, I told you that we should have done morphology and reptiles. Look for Sam Sweet.
Dr. Sam Sweet from CSP. He's like an expert in this. I could talk about those very. Oh, I could. Okay, fine.
Is that a new kind of burrito?
Commercial I had to buy.
Great.
All right, now me. I'm sorry, I was distracted, and I apologize for giving you the false impression that that means go ahead and impregnate each other and get arrested and run around and stuff. Okay. That was a false impression. Sorry. We talked about number 23 and misconceptions about natural selection. We talked about number 27, the warm-up from yesterday. That's a question. No? Forgive me. We needed to find the difference between a fundamental and a realized niche. That's study goal number 27, and also I made that yesterday's warm-up. So what's what? What is a fundamental and realized? I'm going to leave it until someone says it. Yeah, bro?
The fundamentals, when it says there's no competition, it's like a perfect match.
And you know, you're sort of right and sort of wrong, because your book focused fundamental and realized on competition only in that explanation. But fundamental and realized is not only about competition. So if you were to leave out the competition, could anybody think of an even more general way to say this?
It's the only species occupying that niche.
Yeah, sort of. I think that was kind of the closest.
All conditions are perfect.
Yeah, I mean, the fundamental niche is where a species could. So when all conditions are perfect, not counting for climate or not counting for competitors, not counting for circumstance, a fundamental niche is how a species could make its living, and realized, as you can probably imagine, is where it actually makes its living. Fundamental being, it could, but realized is more like, well, actually only right there.
What's an example?
So a good example would be the great white shark. Fundamentally, the great white shark can eat almost anything that fits in its mouth. And fundamentally, a great white shark can swim almost anywhere with salt water. I mean, pretty darn near anything in the ocean, a great white shark could eat it and could swim there to get it. That's the fundamental niche of the great white shark is gigantic. Fundamentally speaking, it could probably swim down to the deep dark sea, and it's not going to be especially good at it, but if it bumps into a giant squid or something, it can probably digest it, probably masticate it. So it could. Yeah, I said masticate. But the realized niche of the great white shark is far, far narrower. The realized niche of the great white shark is localized all around the coastlines and the tropic and temperate regions only. They can eat all sorts of stuff, but they'll swim by huge schools of little fish because they're not worth it. And they'll bump into Jose surfing at Moonstone Beach and realize, not flabby enough. I'm going to leave this guy on a surfboard. And the great white has a realized niche that is focused on generally like 25 to 500 foot depth, which is in the lighted zone of the water, along coastlines, because that's where there's the greatest aggregation of mammals and fatty fish. Focused on stuff at a certain size that's really its choice preferable diet in its choice preferable parts of the world. And by the way, humans could fundamentally live almost anywhere. most of you, biotically speaking, could survive pretty darn well almost anywhere on land. But obviously we choose to live, near water, temperate regions. Enough example? Graham and then Jacqueline?
Did you tell this class about your altercation with the gray white?
It wasn't really an altercation, I just panicked.
Oh, did you tell our class about it?
Did I?
Heard it like secondhand. I want to hear. If you have like.
I never told you the story? I got bumped at Moonstone?
No.
Well, I don't want to talk about it
If you
now
have time
because I
at the end
swear
of
it
class.
takes a lot of time and it makes me sweat all over. And it's like the most anxiety-rich experience of my life. The punchline is I hyperventilated and lost track of time and shot giant snot bubbles and peed myself and probably pooed myself. But we're not going to deliver the story today, so you won't reach the punchline for many, many days. Question?
So every species has both of these?
Every species has both, yes. And the difference between them is greater in some species than others. Some can afford to choose more than others. But yeah, that's a really good question. Thanks for asking it. Anybody else? Yeah.
How do nature habitat affect species from
So the reason that we have this conversation about species is you need to offer at least the fundamental niche to keep the species alive. And then you need to find the realized niche if you really want that species to thrive in conservation. When we don't make that distinction, our wildlife reserves become more of a straitjacket than a life jacket. You know what I mean? Okay. Looking over 5.2, I am done with my deep thoughts unless you have questions. Okay, great. And then in assignment 5.1 about the reading packet that was due today, so some of you either copied or actually read the packet last night. There's a couple that I want to talk about. I will ask you if you have questions, and if not, I'll skip them. Because I always tell you the reading packet's on every exam, but most of these are built to be straightforward. Number 10 I was going to skip unless you have a question. Number 11 I've wanted to talk about. And you'll have to forgive me, I still don't know how to teach this study goal. I understand the concept, but please bear with me, I really don't know the best way to explain it. I want to start by asking you, how many of you are recreational fishermen? Or anglers, excuse me. I mean fishermen in the genderless sense. And how many of you know a commercial fisherman? And how many of you watch television programs that discuss commercial fishing, like the one about the crabs in Alaska that I have never seen, but I hear is good? Deadliest Catch, perhaps? Or have ever seen it, so you kind of get an idea of the conditions for this conversation. Okay. And how many of you didn't raise your hand for any of those other things? Cool. You can just be quiet and give me a massage while I do the rest. All right. So you remember from our very first in-class activity with the M&Ms and the straws and the Tupperwares, unless your name is Lane and you showed up late.
Right.
Okay. You remember that thing with the M&Ms where the question is, how many can we take out that maximizes our yield while still giving us a sustainable harvest in future years. You know you can take all the M&Ms out the first day, but then you're going to run out, right? Because remember that. There was 20 in the tub, you can take all 20. And in the equation, everybody remember what's the maximum you could take out of that day? And keep doing it? Yeah. Globally, regulating real actual fisheries is really complicated. You remember we talked about this, that we have imperfect mathematics with imperfect information. So we don't know the exact replacement rates. We don't know exactly how many are being removed. We don't know exactly how many will show up next year. So unlike the M&M thing, we have all the same problems about people having bigger problems than fish count, and people having mouths to feed, and people cheating for a variety of reasons, plus the real actual example we were supposed to talk about, the complications of figuring out the math and having imperfect information and imperfect understanding of a complicated system that's changing. So fisheries get really tricky. If you, and by the way, feel free to jump in because I know you're like totally different level than I am, and I struggle to explain this correctly because I don't know enough. Does anybody not know that Hayden's father is a commercial fisherman and that Hayden also fishes actively with his father? You all knew that. Okay. So I'll discuss crab fishing in Alaska because he's less likely to catch my mistakes. And also because they made a television show about it, so you might be slightly closer on some of the details. The fishery is regulated by a maximum catch per year. So I believe the deal for crabs is when they pull out the 1 millionth crab that year, it's over. No more fishing. And they call all the fishermen and they say, okay, you're on your last catch because we pulled out 1 million crabs now. It's over. Come back next year. So there's the opening day. Everybody knows when that day will be. You get your boat ready. You hire your crew. You put your pots in the water. And it's opening day. Go get them. And there's a guy at the dock that's watching the clock, and it hits midnight, and he goes, and the foghorn goes off, and everybody just gets out of the harbor to go get the crabs. And they've got from that second until 1 million harvested to catch crabs. And I made up the number, so don't quote me on the 1 million, it's just for the sake of conversation. Let's call it 100 to make it even easier, because I suck at math. So they've got from that second until they catch 100 crabs to call it game over. Are we cool with this? This creates what we might call a system of crushing free-for-all competition. Because if my boat breaks, that's a bummer. The other fishermen got out there and they took all of them. So Kate and Kyla and Carl, they went out there and they got all the crabs, and woe is me, I got none. And I can't pay my debts because my boat broke. Or Carlton says, wait a minute, I'm afraid these conditions are too dangerous for me. And the rest of us go, sorry bro, we have no fear, we're going to go get all of them. And you played it safe. I am forced into dangerous fishing, but if we don't go get these crabs, we all know we're not going to pay our bills, right? This is what I mean by crushing free-for-all competition. Check out what happens. A, you've got to rush. B, if it's dangerous, who cares? Do you guys know what the television show is called? The Deadliest Catch? Yeah, because pretty much by the United States Census Bureau definition of all the list of jobs, this is literally the deadliest. Like, if the Census Bureau recognizes that as a profession in the United States, it's safer than catching crabs in Alaska.
I think it's ship breaking down from Alaska. That's true. Like breaking down ships in the harbor and like ripping them apart is actually the worst. But that's like definitely really true.
Can't be right.
Pretty sure I'm right.
Oh, gee, kids are smarter. Okay, fine, prove it. So I'll stop saying this in my other classes, but I yield.
Almost deadly.
And yeah, so it's the almost deadliest job. That totally steals my thunder, dude. My whole lecture just crashes. Stop the bus, everybody get off. Whatever, so it's the second deadliest job. Point being that it's still super deadly because you realize that those fishermen during the crab season, they sleep like 4 hours a night. And they fish the other 20 hours of the day, which is almost all in the dark. And if a storm comes or hell or high water comes, it doesn't matter. You got to keep fishing. Because once they reach 100, you're done fishing. So if you're not fishing, someone else is taking your money to the bank. So if it's dangerous, you go fishing anyway. And if you're tired, you shut up and you go fishing anyway. And you get these horrible conditions with water splashing across the deck of a boat that's barely afloat at night with a bunch of exhausted fishermen. And everybody knows what you call a fishing vessel with no beer on board, right? A shipwreck. So everybody's all tired, and they're all super relaxed, and the boat's all sloshing, and there's water on the deck. And sometimes the dudes go over, or the ladies go over. If you guys want a job when you get out of high school, all you need is a pulse. Experience helps, but they got to replace the other fishermen.
You get paid a ton.
You might.
How?
I had a couple of homies that had 0 qualifications, so they went to Alaska and they worked salmon and they made a killing. Because, like it sounds, it's a ton of work and it's dangerous and it's really dodgy and it's a rush of income because everybody's fishing the whole time. So check this out. It's a rush, it's dangerous, and of course you realize when everybody gets back to the harbor, all 4 of us come back with a ship full. So we got to go to the market and say, anybody want crab? And she's saying, anybody want crab? And she's saying, anybody want crab? And you got to understand supply and demand, right? When there's a whole lot of supply, the demand goes down, so the price goes down. You guys notice? Yes?
Yeah.
So you get what's called a flooded market. So for the fishermen, it's actually not that profitable. It kind of sucks. How did the lobster market go in the first week after opening?
It started out pretty good, then it just went kind of downhill after everybody got out.
You guys understand what he just said? The price of the lobster when you show up at the fish market on the very first day is like, oh my God, finally the lobsters are here. We'll give you $9 a pound.
I think it's like 12 or 13.
Huh! Quite a bit of money per pound. But a week later, every lobster fisherman in Santa Barbara County is showing up at the market like, come on, please take my lobsters. And the market says, we'll give you $7, $6.
Yeah, like 8 or 9, maybe.
Smart kids cracking my lecture. So essentially, you understand that because everybody's coming in from that same rush of fishing, the market gets flooded and the price goes down. And it sucks being a fisherman when you would have gotten $13 one day, now you get $9 the next day. There goes all your profit. That $4, that was the money you were going to take home. That's what's going to put your kid in college or whatever. And of course, so what if you got to drag pipes along the bottom of the ocean? And so what if you mangle the babies that you throw back? And so whatever it takes, you got to get the stuff out. Because if you don't get it, someone else will take your money to the bank. So we use what's called the whatever it takes methodology. Where fishermen don't really care about conservation as much, because if conservation slows down my fishing or lowers my success, I'm sorry, I believe in the environment, but I got mouths to feed and I got to get the crabs before these punks get the crabs. You understand what I mean by whatever it takes methods? Yeah?
The guys that go out, are they just like, not completely self-employed, but it's like what they harvest is what they get, not like the big company that runs those ships? How many
There's-
huge companies own these ships?
There's a blend of answers to that. So you have both purely independent dudes, like is your father 100% his business,
Yeah.
his boat?
Yeah.
So he may be in debt to someone for the loan to get the boat. Maybe, I don't need to dabble into his father's debt scenario. But he's an independent fisherman. There are captains who work for a larger corporation that lets them use the corporation's boats. And then the most common setup is independents that conglomerate under a creditor that regulates the up and down of the economy by giving the captain a slightly regular fee with a percentage of yield above that. And so they pay all the costs, and then they take all the money, and they kind of like even it out to being a salary for the captain. That's the globally most common method. So most of those big ships are part of a creditor's set of captains.
But the big corporations that own the boats, that let captains use the boats, could they afford conservation?
Maybe.
If they
Maybe.
did well, they make less money, but they could afford conservation.
I think that essentially the answer is yes, it's possible, but if it's not profitable and someone else is taking the profit, it's just not a winning business practice.
Right.
Okay. So now comes the alternative. You guys know how the stock market works, where you like own a share of Apple?
Yeah.
You don't actually own a stapler in Apple or an iPod in the warehouse. You own a percentage of the company. Do we agree with this? And what that means is you paid $100 to buy a percent of the company. If the company grows, you can sell that percent for $105. Does that make sense to everybody? Because when the company's a bigger chunk of money, your share of that is now a bigger chunk of that bigger chunk of company, right? Does that make sense? This is the idea with catch shares. Imagine this scenario, and I'm going to make all the math really round just to demonstrate the principle, but realize that the math is actually a lot stickier. But follow me, okay? Watch this. Of that 100 crabs, you get a quarter, you get a quarter, you get a quarter, and I get a quarter. That's the fishery. Now next year, if the fishery makes 200 crabs, then you get a quarter, you get a quarter, you get a quarter, and I get a quarter. Which means this year we each catch 25 crabs, but next year we each catch 50 crabs. Everybody got that? Everybody in the audience heard that? We own shares of the fishery, of the system. Of the annual limit, I get a quarter, she gets a quarter, she gets a quarter, he gets a quarter. Yeah?
Does that mean that each boat is allowed to catch a quarter?
Right, and no more.
So,
It's kind of like a socialist scheme that if she's a better fisherman, she's got to stop when she reaches a quarter. In the previous system, if she was a better fisherman, she could have caught more fish for a crowd. But we're talking about you're going to get capped at your share of the fishery, and that's it. Right? First of all, please look up. There's no hurry. If I see him leaving the harbor, I'll be like, good luck out there, have fun fishing. When he comes back, he hasn't flooded the market. He's going to make more money because he's the only guy that went out that day. Why would I want to go out when he's going out? We're going to come back and flood and get less money. I'm going to wait for his kid's birthday when he's going to take the day off. Then I'm going to go fishing and be the only guy in the water. And it's more profitable. It's also safer. Like, hey, it's bad weather. All you're going to get is a quarter anyway. You can go when it's all stormy, but you can just kick back and go get your quarter tomorrow, and it's safer. So we don't dispose of fishermen as much. And check out this one. This is a really big deal because before I was competing against them to make sure that they wouldn't take my money to the bank. But now, it's an investment. If I own a quarter of the crabs in Alaska per year, do you guys realize that just like having a share in Apple, like you want Apple to do well, right? Well, I want the crabs in Alaska to do well. Now conservation is profitable. You create an incentive for fishermen to conserve the resource because it grows their investment in the future. I feel like 80% of you have either been asleep or are now definitely asleep, because this is a very remote topic. Most of you couldn't care less. Some of you don't even like fish. But, you know, like, this is just so far away, and I totally get that. But look, this is a really serious issue for a few reasons, and I'm going to do that one more time, and then we're out of here. I mean, we're not leaving the class, we're moving on from this topic. By removing the rush, it becomes safer and more profitable for the fishermen. It also makes a profit incentive to use environmentally friendly practices. Because you're conserving the resource.
So if you conserve the resource, there's more resource, and
What she just said, if you conserve the resource, then there's more resource, then your share is worth more. There's a lot of fishermen that literally, once they get the catch share, they stop fishing. It's like, hey, look, I got exactly what I need to pay my bills. If I leave them in the water, I'll get bigger ones next year. Or I can sell my share of the catch to somebody who caught too many fish. He comes back and he's like, oh, dang, I caught 26%. It's like, okay, I'll sell you 1% of my allowed catch. That way you didn't break the law. And that way I make money. I didn't even go fishing. It creates a tradable, profitable, investable commodity for the resource being healthy, not being on the deck.
Who would you buy shares from?
Now we get to the really, 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 really sticky problems here. For one thing, distributing the shares is really tricky. What if we realize there's only 4 shares and there's 6 fishermen right now? Ooh, yeah, about that. One of the big problems with catch shares is it fires a lot of fishermen. Because when we set it up, we say, okay, given the math, there's 10 shares and 20 fishermen. Sometimes they're auctioned off. Sometimes there's a seniority system or a volume system. But there's always a loser in either of those systems. Either you lose by dumb luck, or you're the young guy that's got all the energy and all the debt, and then you lose. Or you're the old guy that put in all the investment and can't make a profit on the tail end because you've got the old methods. There's always a loser in who does and does not get a share. Has this been your experience in your family? Have you heard about this or no?
Never heard about it.
There's like a lot of controversy about how we give out the shares, and it's honestly like a real regulation nightmare to figure that out. And I recognize that there hasn't been a very safe and fair solution for everybody. First and then second and then third.
Would you be allowed to sell shares?
Yeah, the assumption is that it's transferable. And there's all these names for them.
Well, then wouldn't the company just buy shares and essentially monopolize an industry?
I think without regulation, yes. And so, by the way, the other problem is it requires more governance. That whole thing about limiting free enterprise, to say, sorry, bro, you're over your limit. You got to stop fishing because you're a really good fisherman. That's just fundamentally un-American. American. Yep.
I'm not sure about all commercial fisheries, but I know some of them. There's only like a certain amount of like commercial licenses like allotted per year. And if you want to get a commercial license, the only way to get one is to buy one from somebody who's selling it, who's like stopping.
Right, right. And so that's also like catch shares. There's already a limited amount of licenses for some commercial fisheries. That's true. So like lobster licenses, commercial lobster licenses, you either enter the lottery and good luck, you transfer it from a retiring fisherman and you got to know people, or you just don't fish lobster commercially, right? So already there's a challenge in getting a commercial license. That's not a perfect system either.
Why wouldn't it work to, if you had like 4 shares and 6 people, to just make the shares smaller so that you can distribute them?
That's a really good question. I don't know. A, I know that it's allowed for fishermen to share the harvest with other fishermen as long as they are the primary on record for the transaction. So if I own the share, you can go do the fishing for me. I just got to be the guy that takes it to the inspector at the dock before we sell it. And then we'll work on the math. But I don't know why they don't make them into smaller shares. Probably for the same reason that they don't make corporate shares infinitely small. There's like an economic viability trade-off tipping point with the cost of entry and the potential for profit. But that's math that's like way over my head. Anybody else on the catch share thing? Because I kind of want to move on.
So what's the original one called? So this is the...
This is like a current system.
Okay.
Seasons and licenses.
Okay.
I don't know. It probably does, I just don't know it. Okay, so really quickly, I don't want to spend all day on this. It happens to be something that I'm personally very interested in. The research for this was all done by your good friends at UCS Robra. Steve Gaines, one of my homies over at UCSB, wrote the paper that proved the economic and environmental benefits of catch shares. He did like a global analysis of all fisheries and then all catch share fisheries, and it looks pretty hot. Bycatch goes way down because, again, there's a benefit to keeping the system. With less rush, there's less bycatch. And there are examples of very successful ones, including Alaska's halibut, which is considered to be probably the single greatest global fishery in terms of fisherman profit and environmental sustainability. Alaskan halibut may be the most sustainable fishery on Earth today in the ocean. All right. Skipping 12, skipping 13, unless you have questions. Sorry, we're back to notes. 12, 13, no questions? Check me out. 14, I got you a movie, Wednesday night at 6 p.m. The whole vanishing of the bees question. Awesome movie, like really, really good one. And BT Dubs, $15 to $20 billion of our American economy depends directly and primarily on bees. Almost all fruit are pollinated primarily by bees. Almost all grains are seeds made primarily by pollination by bees. And globally, somewhere between 40 and 70% of bee hives are collapsing year in and year out. So you can do the math about the money versus the success of the bees.
Did you say 15 billion?
What's that?
Did you say 15 billion?
15 to 20 billion of the U.S. economy annually. That's actually a pretty big chunk. Like, our economy's big, but 15 to 20 billion is huge. Something like 90% of Georgia's agricultural input depends on bees. That number was kind of from the hip, by the way, if you couldn't tell. 15, 16, 17, skipping, 18, skipping. I want to talk about number 19. Here's one of the interesting deep thoughts to make you a good biologist. Keep it quiet. And I got a bad feeling I'm not going to finish this one, but I really want to because this is like one of the most things in the class. So bear with me, I'm going to really, really rush it. There's a lot of people who make money doubting climate change, remember that. But there's also a lot of people who plain old don't understand it, and that's different. When you leave my class, I do not want you to ever say that climate change causes extinction because temperature goes up. Please remember, polar bears are not going extinct because the temperature. They like it warm. Polar bears, like all bears, lay out in the sun to chill. If you make a big black rug on the ground, the polar bear will walk over to the black rug and lay down. They like the hot. They're going extinct because the thing with the babies and the moms are getting enough fish because the ice melt and the thing's smaller and the feeding season and the weaning. And okay? Talked about this like 100 times, right? We've talked that the Holocene extinction is the fastest and largest mass extinction event ever. It just isn't over yet. And a lot of people make the mistake, like, come on, it's just 1 degree. That's not going to cause any extinction. And the answer is, of course. Please, 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 don't ever say that the temperature is the deadly thing. Temperature is not deadly. 1 degree of temperature change is fine. Nothing on this planet would die if the planet goes up by 1 degree because of the degree of temperature change. Nothing. There is no organism that couldn't survive 1 degree higher temperatures. At the spot where it's 1 degree hotter that day, no big deal. Everybody can adapt to that temperature change. I don't mean like adapt in the evolutionary sense. I mean in the sense that they would, like travel north a little bit, or travel south a little bit, or go up in elevation, or go down in elevation, or go east, or go west. Some of the flowers will sprout at a different time. Some of the insects will lay their eggs at a different time. Anybody see where I'm going with this? They don't respond in the same way, and the ecosystem relationships fall apart. It's called, check this out, ecosystem shear. This is the critical detail where you can separate the wheat from the chaff in a conversation about climate change. The fool in the conversation will say something like, because it's like 1 degree hotter, so they die because it's like hotter, because warming, globes. And I am mocking people, and I hope it's not you that I'm mocking. But that's just plain old dumb. It's not the 1 degree of temperature that's going to kill pretty much anything. Remember, different species will respond differently. And you've got to realize that there are different parts of the food web with different requirements. Think about the food webbing assignment at the beginning of Unit 2. Remember that food webbing assignment at the beginning of Unit 2? Was it 3?
1 or 2.
Whatever. That food webbing thing in the Sierras? Well, we talked about like the grasses and the shrubberies and the flowers and the trees and the oak trees and the pine trees and like the grasshoppers and the aquatic plants and the trout and the frog and the coyote. I'm going to stop. Every one of those things can deal with 1 extra degree of temperature, but they will deal with it differently. Of 350 species surveyed in the Sierras a couple of years ago, 85% have already changed their range. The shocking news is they're not all going together. Some of those birds go lower in altitude to find the grass seeds at the same time of the year. Because some of those birds are migratory, when they show up, all of the snow has melted, so they got to go further north to find the ponds of snowmelt than they did before. Some of the birds go uphill, some go downhill, some go east, some go west, some go north, some go south, some come later, some come earlier. And that's just the birds. Now think about the plants, their seeds will have success in different regions, so they will shift either uphill or downhill or north or south, and they all just split. And check out my funny drawing. I showed you. Nobody's gone extinct. They're all doing fine. But they're moving in different ways, either earlier or west or south or ecosystem shear or east or north or uphill or downhill or whatever. And it's called ecosystem shear because remember that the flower might come out of the ground no problem, but the pollinator is somewhere else now. Or the caterpillar hatches out of the chrysalis and can't find any milkweed because the milkweed hasn't sprouted out of the ground yet. Or the duck flies in and has to go to a new lake, and the new lake doesn't have the duck food. And it's the ecosystem relationships which are lost because everybody survives that 1 degree of the worms getting global. Everybody survives that 1 degree. The 1 degree don't matter none. But they survive it by doing different things. Imagine all of you depended on each other, and you show up tomorrow and everybody else is gone. Everybody either came before you and already left, or they're going to come after you're gone, or they're in that room, or they're down the hill over there, or they're over in that room. And it's those, remember those community level interactions? There's actually many more than food relationships. You know, the keystones start to fall out. It's called ecosystem shear. Bye, children. I think we finished that one, sort of, right? You like